This session deals with functional analysis of behavior, the experimental manipulation of contingencies. This is part of functional behavioral assessment, although very often the two terms functional analysis and functional assessment are used interchangeably. They are not the same thing. It's important to know that. A functional analysis of behavior includes an experimental manipulation, whereas a functional assessment includes usually interviews, direct observation in natural environments, and a general ABC analysis. In the experimental manipulation, we go a step further. Basically, we're saying if it's not working, can I go back on the value? No, we need to do a functional analysis. The functional analysis of behavior is a specific kind of functional assessment and is used to determine the function of the behavior, that is, to discover which factors maintain the behavior in question. Strategies include the manipulation of contingencies or experimentation and direct observation. The basic behavioral functions can be that the behavior produces attention or access to toys and desired activities. Basically, the behavior produces a positive reinforcer. Or the behavior allows the person to avoid or escape from demands. And basically, the behavior produces negative reinforcement. Or the behavior occurs because of sensory consequences. And, so it is exposed to automatic reinforcement. In all of these three cases, we see usually quite high frequency behaviors because they've all been reinforced through various ways. So when we use a systematic experimental manipulation of contingencies to define and to find out which of these functions the behavior serves, we might design several different situations or contingencies and carefully observe how the behavior changes. And then we repeat the experiment a number of times so that we can be sure it wasn't just an accidental observation. This procedure, while it might seem as if it takes a bit of time up front, it avoids time being wasted on a try and hope intervention. So the direct observation involves directly observing the behavior and then analysing the contingencies that have led to that behavior, the antecedent and the consequences. Let's just say take thumb sucking as a problem behavior. It is a problem because of potential damage to the gum and teeth, and also because of potential damage to tissues on the thumb and the finger. It also can cause social stigma in older children and adults who suck their thumb. So, if you saw somebody sucking their thumb during a committee meeting, you would certainly have some thoughts about that, and it would cause social stigma for that person. So, thumb sucking, while it might not be considered a big problem in babies, it does eventually cause a problem. It might also lead to the avoidance of tasks or social situations. So in order to run some functional tests, we need to clearly define the target behavior and the dimensions to be mentioned, the dimensions on which it is to be measured. For instance, frequency or duration or whatever other dimensions. For review of the dimensions of behavior, you need to go back to the behavior measurement lectures. Then we design the experimental manipulations or tests that manipulate different environmental events to see how the behavior changes under those circumstances. And then we observe directly and systematically the behavior and reassess and repeat the tests. So let's have a functional analysis of thumb sucking in 4 conditions. The first condition will be alone. The alone condition, there's no stimulation provided, there's no social interaction provided. This condition will check whether the behavior is reinforced through automatic reinforcement. The second situation will be a demand condition. There will be a suitable demand will be placed on the person, not too much, but just a suitable demand. And we'll see if the behavior is used to avoid the demand to avoid the problem, the demand. In which case, if that behavior is used has the function of avoiding the demand, basically, we can assume that there's negative reinforcement in play. The next situation will be social attention. The child will be reprimanded when he's sucking his thumb, and basically, if that increases the thumb sucking behavior, we can assume that the positive reinforcement is in place. And then we will have an enriched situation where there's lots of stimulation and where other behaviors will be reinforced, the thumb-sucking behaviors, which gives us an indication then if this behavior does not occur in this situation, then it gives us an inroad into designing the intervention. We will also graph the behavior. This is a hypothetical graph. So whenever you're going to see these video clips in just a moment, you need to think about what behavioral dimension will you measure and how will you measure it, and then take some data because you'll be asked to draw this graph afterwards. You can replay the videos as you need to. So the functional analysis of thumb sucking, 4 conditions. The first condition. I will show you all the alone conditions in consecutive order, although of course they weren't all taken in consecutive order. So you need to imagine that these are taken at various times of the day or at various days. You want to repeat the condition in a different situation. Third observation. Of course, as you imagine, it is really important that you assess the behavior, the severity of the behavior before you expose anybody to the alone condition or any of the experimental conditions. If, for instance, the behavior is a severe self-injurious behavior, you might not be able to allow for the alone condition to be observed like this. In our case here, we have a behavior that doesn't actually cause immediate danger to the child or anybody else, so we were able to run the condition a number of times. Here we have the demand condition. The child is given a task to complete and we'll observe whether the behavior, the problem behavior, has a function of avoiding the demand, and thereby being negatively reinforced. The third time the demand condition is put in place. Then we'll have a condition where there's social attention for the inappropriate behavior. So basically, we're assessing whether the inappropriate behavior is functions functions with a positive reinforcer. And finally, we have the enriched situation. We didn't run a third negative reinforcement condition. We ran the enriched condition instead. And we run another enriched situation. So that was the functional analysis setups, the experimental manipulations that we produced. I want you to stop the video now and draw the graph for your observations. You can of course go back to the video clips and review them to see whether you have decided on the right dimension of the behavior. I want you just to practice drawing a graph. So what are the conclusions of the functional analysis? Write down the conclusions from your graph. Write down the functions. What is a function? What are the functions of this thumb-sucking behavior in this young child? And then consequently, what are the recommendations for interventions? So again, pause the video now and write those down for yourself. The functions of behavior based on the functional analysis. Based on this functional analysis, it is likely that the thumb sucking was a function of automatic reinforcement. It would need to identify if the sensation of the thumb or the mouse are the key function. That we haven't done that yet, because if you can find out whether it is the actual feeling on the thumb or the feeling in the mouth, it would, depending on which one it is, it would obviously create a different intervention. We also saw that thumb sucking may be also a function of positive reinforcement. When they were getting, there was a bit of that, not much, but there was a bit of that. So it might be that some of the attention given to the thumb sucking might have actually reinforced that behavior. Based on the functional analysis, it is likely that the thumb sucking was not a function of demand avoidance. It's quite clear that when there was demands, when asked of the child, he was not engaging in the problem behavior at all. In fact, the demands may even function as a reinforcer for the absence of thumb sucking. You could see he really enjoyed that, playing and having some demands placed on him. He enjoyed that. So the implications for interventions would be that behaviors that are maintained by automatic reinforcement are difficult to change because it is difficult to remove the automatic reinforcer. So the intervention should be based on reinforcement of alternative or other behaviors or competing responses. Interventions could include alternative sensory stimulation, such as the use of a teething toy when he's on his own. Behaviours that are maintained by positive reinforcers, such as social attentions, are addressed by removing the positive reinforcer from the problem behaviour. So you would maybe instruct the mother to ignore the problem behaviour rather than reinforcing it. So the intervention should be based on differential reinforcement of alternative or other behaviour and extinction of the problem behaviour. The outcome of the functional analysis would be that we have operational description of the undesired behavior. We have the prediction of times and situations of the undesirable behaviors. We have a definition of the functions and an identification of the variables that maintain the undesirable behavior. Ultimately, the objectives of the functional analysis are not to define or eliminate. They are to understand the structure and function of the behavior and to guide the intervention, to teach effective alternatives. So the functional analysis has an educative function. One important point to remember when we do a functional assessment or a functional analysis is that topographically similar behaviors can serve different functions. So even when the behaviors look very, very similar, they may not have the same function. Also, topographically different behaviors can serve the same or similar functions. So even behaviors that look very, very different might still serve the same function. Behaviors can serve more than one function. That is also important. We've seen it in the example here that the behavior may very well serve two functions. Therefore, not all topographically similar behaviors will respond to the same intervention techniques. So a functional analysis will guide us so that we design our interventions to address the function of the behavior, not necessarily the topography. The topography can be quite irrelevant in the functional analysis. We are looking at the function of the behavior, and of course we are addressing the topography if the topography means that there's harm comes to the person in question. So behaviors can have one or a combination of function, and ultimately function-based intervention require a careful look at curricular requirements, basic behavior management, and availability of non-contingent reinforcement. The references, some references to this presentation, and especially interesting to see Brian Iwata talking himself in the YouTube videos. So feel free to explore.